So when a man dies, after this there's judgment. Hebrews 9:27. As it is appointed unto men once to die, but after this the judgment. So the end of sin is death and hell. Boy, hell. What an awful place. The justice of God demands it. The exceeding sinfulness of sin justifies it. You know, you might think hell is overkill. I think God sometimes allows us to come across something or to see something or to learn something that allows us in a very powerful moment to be confronted with truth and to experience it. Let me try to explain this. And I'll use this doctrine of hell as an example. The justice of God demands it, which can be a point of an entire message all itself. But I'm going to focus a little bit here on the exceeding sinfulness of sin justifies it. Think about this for a minute. When you think of sin, you think of lying to your neighbor about whatever. I can't imagine what you'd bother lying to your neighbor about, but something. Lying to your wife about why you got home late for dinner, which is something I never do. I'm late for dinner often, but I never lie about it. Or lying to your pastor about why you weren't in church Sunday. You think of sin, you think of stuff like that. But when God looks at sin, He sees it in its exceeding sinfulness. Let me offer just a couple of simple illustrations. You've heard of Auschwitz, of course. Auschwitz, where men took other men, stripped them of their dignity, stripped them of all their clothing, and marched them naked into a shower room and pressed them in there in numbers of, I think it was 50 to 60 or 100, something like that, where they're all just pressed together, and turned on acid showers. And made them burn in these acid showers and die. So that when they were done, there were just piles of flesh burned with acid. If a human being doing that to another human being does not cause your heart to say, and I'm not cursing, please, don't misunderstand me. I mean this in the most hallowed way possible. But if that doesn't, in your heart, cause you to look at them and say, you belong in hell, there's something wrong with you. In my opinion, you might disagree with me, but I'm telling you, that's what I feel about it. That guy deserves to be in hell. Somebody who would do that to another human being. They would be so wicked, so filthy, so vile, so without humanity, that they would take another human being and put them in a shower and turn acid on them and look at him and watch him die. I'll tell you where I think that guy ought to go. The exceeding sinfulness of sin justifies hell. Now just let that settle in your mind for a little bit. How does a husband feel when his wife's been raped? You see, Modern Christianity has corrupted mercy and justice so much that people out there don't understand how wicked they are when they say, this guy raped my wife, but I just forgive him. Excuse me? When he repents, okay. Even that would be a challenge. I personally think it's disgusting for Christians to say about a rapist, oh well, I'll forgive him. What? God doesn't, unless he repents. You're nicer than God? Your righteousness is greater than his? My point is, that's not righteousness. That's very ugly. God's answer to rapists is hell. Do you understand that? Listen to me. God's answer to these wicked people is hell. Your answer is, I think you ought to be forgiven. I think you ought to just forget about it. What's the matter with you? No, he deserves to go to hell. By the way, so do you. So do I. Come on. See, we're so accustomed with sin, we don't see it as exceeding sinful. We don't get it. You want to know how bad sin is? Take a look at hell. As far as God's concerned, that's where sin belongs. Because God sees what sin really is. You play around with it in its blossom and its early buds. God sees what that early bud comes into. I recently come across the story of a woman in the 20s. It's an amazing story, but it is so to the point. I'm going to share it with you, or bits and pieces of it. There's a woman in the 20s, I think her name was Collins, and her little boy went missing. And for various reasons that are really difficult to really get clear on, the police department trying to save face found this little boy, a little runaway, and told him to say he was this woman's son. Some of you have heard about this story. And they brought this little boy to this woman and said, here's your son. We found him. And they're getting the presses, taking the pictures and all this. And she says, that's not my son. And so they start telling her, oh, yes, it is. He's just changed. It's been a year since you've seen him. He's changed. Well, one thing leads to another, and it becomes very obvious this is not her son. I mean, she takes him home, for example, and she's got the last time she measured him, she puts this boy, he's like 5 inches shorter, and you don't shrink in a year by 3 or 4 inches, something like that. Anyway, it was very obvious to her that they were pulling something, and the more she protested, the more the police department insisted. And pretty soon, this police department had her committed to an insane asylum where they treated her just... When you think about this story and you read through it and you see that they have a movie about it, when you really engage this story and you see this thing developing, I don't know of a normal human being who wouldn't look at some of these people and say, man! I mean, the cry for justice just howls to the heavens, I mean, breaches the sky, as Shakespeare would say. How can people treat people like this? How could this police officer say, if you don't think this is your son? And the guy knew it wasn't her son. So, well, if you're going to go out creating this problem, we're going to put you in the insane asylum and put her in this insane asylum. And it's just unbelievable. And it gets worse than that. They torture them there. It was back in the 20s, and I can't go into detail because it would take too much time, but man, what a story this is. And then on top of that, good night. We find out what happened to her son finally. Some monster took this kid, another kid, and forced him by threat of death that he had to participate in this, and they would go trolling about, prowling about, and find little boys walking alone, and this guy would say, oh, your parents are sick in the hospital, I got to take you to them, and then he'd get this kid in the car, and they'd take him with him. He would gather these kids and put them in a chicken coop and keep them in prison. For a time, he'd gather 3 or 4 or 5 of them, and then this man would axe these children to death right in front of this other little kid, and then make that kid do it too. With an axe, kill these children. This actually happened. This is a true story. This is not some made-up thing. This is real history. This actually took place. It's horrible, isn't it? It's horrible. And anybody relating that history or going through that history and thinking about that, what happened to that woman, what happened to her child, what this man did to something like 20 different children before he was finally caught. And it's interesting because they're spending their time trying to cover up this whole thing, their failure to find this little boy. They're spending all the time working on trying to keep this mother from embarrassing them while they weren't looking for her kid. If they had been looking for her kid, they might have found him before he committed all these crimes. Who knows? It's one of those things. It really did happen, like Auschwitz. This really happened in America, in Los Angeles, by the way. And if when you look at the exceeding sinfulness of sin, you don't see in that the justification for hell. Something's been broken in your brain. There is a reason that God made hell. There is a reason God puts people there who are sinners. He puts them there because of the exceeding sinfulness of sin.